The locomotive's whistle cut through the stillness of the Wyoming plains like a banshee's wail, its echo rolling across the endless expanse of sagebrush and dust. The train, a hulking beast of iron and steam, shuddered to a stop at the weathered platform of Bitterroot, a speck of a town clinging to the edge of nowhere. Smoke curled into the pale sky as passengers spilled out cowhands with calloused hands, merchants clutching satchels, and women in faded calico dresses shielding their eyes from the relentless sun. The platform buzzed briefly with farewells and hurried steps, then fell silent as the train chugged away, leaving only a cloud of grit in its wake. When the dust settled, a single figure remained. A girl, small and slight, stood alone on the splintered boards. Her name was Clara, and she couldn't have been more than 10. Her hair, the color of ripe barley, hung in a loose braid beneath a bonnet too big for her head. Her dress, patched and threadbare, fluttered in the dry wind. In her hands, she gripped a worn valise, its leather cracked and one latch dangling uselessly. The boots on her feet, scuffed and oversized, had belonged to someone else, maybe a brother, maybe a father, long gone now. Beside the valise lay a scrap of paper, folded hastily and left on the platform like an afterthought. Clara had read it once, then tucked it into her pocket, its words heavier than the bag she carried. Stay put. Someone might come. Or they won't. That was all her stepmother, Agnes, had left her, with no money, no food. Just a note that felt like a slap. Bitterroot wasn't a place that noticed lost children. It was a crossroads for dreamers and desperados. A town where men chased gold in the hills and women sold whiskey or worse in the saloons. A child alone was just another shadow, unremarkable and ignored. Clara stood still, her eyes scanning the horizon as the sun climbed higher. The platform creaked under her weight, the only sound besides the distant caw of a crow. A man in a dusty frock coat, his mustache waxed to sharp points, stepped around her without a glance, his boots clicking toward the saloon. Two women, their faces painted and their laughter brittle, passed by, their skirts rustling as they whispered something Clara couldn't hear. The station master, a grizzled man with a wad of tobacco bulging his cheek, looked up from his ledger, muttered something about strays, and went back to his work. Her stomach growled, a sharp reminder of the biscuit she'd eaten yesterday or last. The sun beat down, turning the air to a shimmer. Clara's throat was parched, her lips cracked, but she didn't move. She waited. Every gust of wind, every clatter of hooves in the distance, made her heart leap. She didn't know who she was waiting for, only that she had to believe someone would come. To give up was to admit she was truly alone, and Clara wasn't ready for that truth. She thought of her mother, her real mother, whose memory was a faint glow in the darkness of her mind. A voice singing hymns by candlelight, a hand brushing her hair, fragments of a life before Agnes, before the cold nights and sharp words. That memory was Clara's anchor, keeping her from drifting into despair. She wouldn't cry. Tears were for places where someone might care, and Bitterroot wasn't that place. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of violet and amber, the platform emptied. The last train of the day roared away, its whistle fading into the distance. The town stirred to life under the glow of oil lamps, the clink of glasses, and the tinny notes of a piano drifting from the saloons. Shadows lengthened, sharp and hungry, as men with hard eyes and harder hearts spilled into the streets. Clara shivered in the cooling air, her arms aching from holding the valise, but she refused to sit. Sitting felt like surrender, like admitting she belonged to this place of dust and broken dreams. The night deepened, stars pricking the sky one by one. Somewhere, a coyote howled. Somewhere closer, a bottle shattered, followed by a curse. Clara whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. Just a little longer. Someone's coming. She didn't know if she believed it, but she said it, clinging to the stories she'd heard as a child, tales of knights and heroes, of lost children found. Maybe that was all she had left, a story to keep her standing. Morning came, harsh and unyielding, the sun creeping over the horizon like a reluctant witness. Clara hadn't slept. Her legs trembled, her body was cold, but she was still there, a small, stubborn figure on the platform. The night had been cruel. Every creak of the boards, every shadow that moved, had set her nerves alight. She'd clutched the valise tighter, as if it could shield her from the world. Then came the sound of hoofs, not the reckless gallop of a drunk or the uneven trot of a peddler, but a measured, deliberate rhythm. It belonged to a man who walked with purpose, who owned the earth beneath his boots. Samuel Harrow reined in his sorrel mare at the edge of the platform, dust swirling around him like a shroud. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, his face weathered by years under the sun. A gray duster hung to his calves, and a wide-brimmed hat shaded his eyes, though not enough to hide the scar that slashed across his right cheek. A thin, pale line that spoke of violence survived. In Bitterroot, Samuel Harrow was a name spoken with caution. He owned a sprawling ranch west of town, a cattle empire built on sweat and steel. Men said he could buy the town twice over, but he kept to himself. His ranch a fortress guarded by a few trusted hands. Whispers followed hintles of the scar, of a wife lost to fever, of nights spent alone with a bottle and a Bible. No one crossed Samuel Harrow. No one dared. He dismounted, tying his horse to a post, and strode toward the telegraph office, his boots heavy on the boards. That's when he saw here a small girl, hunched against a post, her hands wrapped around a battered valise. Clara looked up, her blue eyes meeting his. They were hollow with hunger and fear, but there was something else there, a spark of defiance that made Samuel pause. He'd seen eyes like that before, long ago, in the face of his daughter, Ellie, before the fever took her. The memory hit like a fist, and he looked away, pushing it down as he entered the office. Inside, he sent a wire about a cattle deal, his mind half on the words, half on the girl outside. He didn't know why she lingered in his thoughts. Bitterroot was full of strays, human and otherwise. But when he stepped back onto the platform, Clara was still there, her gaze fixed on the horizon, as if salvation might ride in on the next breeze. Her dress was too thin for the morning chill, her bonnet askew. She didn't beg or whimper, and that was what undid him. Samuel cursed under his breath, his boots carrying him toward her before he could talk himself out of it. He crouched down, his duster brushing the boards. "What's your name, child?" His voice was gruff, unused to softness. "Clara," she said, her voice small but clear. "Where's your kin?" She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the valise. "Gone." Samuel's jaw clenched. He knew that kind of gone final, like a door slammed shut. He stood, adjusting his hat, and walked back to his horse. He mounted, took the reins, then stopped. The wind carried a Memory's voice, pleading, "Don't let me go, Pa." He spat into the dust, angry at himself, then turned the mare back toward Clara. "Get up, girl," he said, his tone sharp but not cruel. "You're coming with me." Clara blinked, unsure. "Move it, or I'll leave that bag behind," he added, though the threat was empty. She obeyed, clutching her valise and scrambling up behind him, her weight barely noticeable in the saddle. Samuel felt it, thaw not on his back, but in his chest, a burden he hadn't asked for but couldn't shake. They rode through Bitterroot, the townsfolk watching from porches and saloon doors. Whispers followed Harrow taking in a stray. What's he want with her? Samuel ignored them, his eyes on the open prairie. He didn't know why he was doing this. Maybe it was guilt for Ellie. Maybe it was the girl's stubborn silence. Or maybe it was because Bitterroot was a place that chewed up the weak, and he'd be damned if it claimed this one. Harrow Ranch sprawled across the plains like a small kingdom, its fields golden with grass, its barns weathered but sturdy. Fences stretched to the horizon, and the air was thick with the scent of leather and livestock. Cattle lowed in the distance, and cowhands shouted as they drove the herd. The main gate bore the Harrow brand, a circled H crossed with a spur, carved in iron. Clara sat stiffly behind Samuel as they passed under the gate, her eyes wide but wary. They stopped before a two-story house, its timber frame solid, but scarred by years of wind and sun. Samuel dismounted, helped Clara down with a grunt, and called to one of his Mina lean, weathered hand named Amos, whose squint was as sharp as his tongue. "This is Amos," Samuel said. "Amos, this is Clara. She's staying. Don't ask questions." Amos spat into the dirt, eyeing Clara like a calf too small to brand. "You sure, boss?" "Do I look unsure?" Samuel snapped. Amos shrugged and walked off. Samuel led Clara inside. The house was rough but warm, with worn rugs and a stone fireplace blackened by years of use. Upstairs, he showed her a small room, a cot, a chest, a window framing the endless plains. You sleep here. You work if you're able. Stay out of trouble. Understand? Clara nodded. Samuel grunted. Supper's at dusk. Be there. He left, the door closing with a thud. Clara stood alone, her valise at her feet. She stared out the window, wondering if this was a home or just another place to wait. Days passed, and she tried to fit in. She woke at dawn, swept floors, carried water, and watched the horses in the corral. The hands teased her at first, calling her Harrow's shadow or little ghost. She was too small to lift hay bales, too frail to mend fences. But she learned. She listened. There was Jonah, a burly hand with a soft laugh, who taught her to hold a currycomb. Horses spook easy, he said, guiding her hand along a mare's flank. Let em know you're steady. There was Leela, the cook, whose sharp tongue hid a kind heart. She showed Clara how to knead dough. You're all bones, child, Leela muttered. Eat, or you'll blow away. Clara learned to ride a pony, clumsy but determined. She watched the men oil their rifles, asked Jonah how to aim. He chuckled but gave her a broken pistol to practice with, unloaded and safe. Slowly, she found a rhythm, but fear lingered. Samuel's presence sealant, towering, made her freeze. She didn't trust his kindness. Kindness had betrayed her before. Agnes had smiled, too. At night, Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She kept her clothes in the valise, ready to leave. One evening, after supper, she sat on the porch, watching the sky blaze red. Samuel came out, a tin cup of coffee in hand. You planning to bolt? He asked, not looking at her. Clara shook her head. Not yet. He snorted. Smart. They sat in silence, the horizon swallowing the sun. Clara wanted to ask why he'd taken her in, but the words wouldn't come. Samuel wanted to ask why she didn't cry, but he knew the answer. They were both scarred by loss, both too stubborn to break. Bitterroot's gossip spread faster than wildfire. In the saloon, men spun tales over whiskey. Harrow's got a girl now, one said, tossing a card. Some say she's his kin, another laughed. Nah, just a stray he pitied. The bartender leaned in. Strange for a man who don't like nobody. At the mercantile, women whispered. Poor child, Mrs. Ellison sighed. That ranch'll eat her alive. Her friend nodded. Men like Harrow don't change. The stories grew. Clara was a niece, a debt, a secret. But all agreed, nothing lasted long at Harrow Ranch. In a dim corner of the saloon, a woman listened. Her name was Agnes, Clara's stepmother. She nursed a glass of gin, her eyes sharp. A girl, a ranch, a rich cowboy. It added up to money. Agnes never left a dime behind. She smiled, cold and calculating. My little lambs found a fat flock. Days later, a rider approached Harrow Ranch, kicking up dust. Amos spotted her first. Trouble's coming, boss, he called. Samuel stepped onto the porch, squinting. The woman dismounted, her face lined but familiar. Agnes. Time hadn't softened her edges. What do you want? Samuel asked, his voice hard. My girl, Agnes said, her smile thin. Clara's mine. You left her to rot, Samuel growled. Agnes shrugged. Changed my mind. No, Samuel said, final. Agnes stepped closer, her voice low. She's worth something now, with your name tied to her. People talk. I could make it worth your while to let her go. Clara watched from the window, her heart racing. Agnes's smirk was a knife in her chest. Samuel's hand twitched near his revolver. Try taking her, and you'll leave in a box. Agnes laughed, mounting her horse. I've got friends, Harrow. This ain't over. She rode off, dust trailing like a curse. That night, the ranch was tense. Amos loaded extra shells. Jonah checked the gates. The dogs growled at nothing. Clara couldn't sleep, knowing Agnes was out there, waiting. Samuel stood on the porch, smoking, his eyes on the dark. When trouble came to Harrow Ranch, it wouldn't come alone. The threat from Agnes hung over Harrow Ranch like a gathering storm, the kind that darkened the Wyoming skies and made the cattle restless in their pens. 3 days passed in uneasy quiet, the ranch hands whispering among themselves as they mended fences and tended the herd, while Samuel Harrow kept a vigilant eye on the distant trail leading from Bitterroot. Clara, too, felt the weight of it, her small hands busier than ever in the kitchen or stables. As if staying occupied could ward off the dread twisting in her gut, Agnes returned not on horseback this time, but in a polished buckboard wagon that gleamed unnaturally in the midday sun, pulled by a pair of mismatched horses that looked as borrowed as her intentions. She had dressed for the occasion in a lavender gown with frayed lace at the cuffs, an attempt at respectability that fooled no one who knew her history. Her hair was pinned up neatly, but her eye-sharp and calculating betrayed the predator beneath the polish. She stepped down from the wagon with a practiced grace, smoothing her skirts as if arriving for tea rather than extortion. Clara spotted her first, peering from behind the corral where she had been helping Jonah brush down a gelding. Her breath caught, and she froze, the currycomb slipping from her fingers into the dust. That gown, that smilite was the same one Agnes had worn the day she promised Clara a new life in Bitterroot, only to abandon her at the station with nothing but lies and a valise. The memory burned, hot and fresh, making Clara's fists clench at her sides. Samuel was on the porch, flanked by Amos and Jonah, his rifle leaning against the rail within easy reach. His scar itched in the heat, a reminder of old battles, as he watched Agnes approach. "Back so soon?" he called, his voice steady but laced with warning. "Thought I made myself clear." Agnes tilted her head, her smile widening like a crack in dry earth. "Oh, Samuel Harrow, always the gruff one. I've come in peace this time. No need for all that posturing." She glanced around the ranch, her gaze lingering on the barns and the distant cattle, appraising it all like a merchant at auction. "Quite the spread you've got here. A man of means, they say. And now, with my Clara under your roof, well, folk are talking." "She ain't yours," Samuel replied, descending the steps slowly, his boots thudding against the wood. Amos and Jonah shifted behind him, hands hovering near their belts. "You tossed her aside like yesterday's scraps. No blood ties, no claim." Agnes laughed, a sound that grated like rusty hinges. "The law sees it different, cowboy. She's my stepdaughter, legal and proper, and I've found a fine family in China, wealthy folk, childless and eager for a pretty little thing like her. They'll pay handsomely for a girl so quiet and obedient. Think of it as a business deal. You hand her over, I get my cut, and everyone walks away richer." Clara emerged from behind the corral then, her face pale, but her eyes unyielding. She stood straight, hands balled into fists, refusing to hide. The idea of being sold like a heifer at market made her stomach churn not just fear, but a deep, simmering anger. She wasn't property. She wasn't a burden to be bartered. Samuel's jaw tightened, his hand inching toward his revolver. "Clara ain't for sale. Not to you, not to anyone. Get off my land before I make you." Agnes's smile faltered, revealing the venom underneath. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You're making a mistake, Harrow. That girl's a liability to a man like you're reclusive, scarred, with ghosts in your past. Let me take her, and I'll even sweeten the pot with a finder's fee. Or refuse, and you'll regret it." Samuel closed the distance, towering over her. "I've regretted plenty in my life, woman. One more won't break me." His eyes bored into hers, unflinching. "Now go." Agnes held his gaze for a moment, then turned sharply, climbing back into the wagon. But as the driver cracked the reins, she leaned out, her face twisted in fury. "You'll see me again, Harrow. And next time, it won't be words I bring. It'll be fire and lead." The wagon rattled away, leaving a trail of dust that lingered like a promise of violence. The ranch fell into a tense hush. Samuel turned to Amos. "Double the watches tonight. Check the ammunition stores. Keep the horses saddled." Amos nodded, his scowl deepening. "You think she's got the guts to follow through, boss?" "She's got something," Samuel muttered, watching the horizon. "And I won't let her touch that girl without a fight." Jonah glanced at Clara, who stood silent but resolute. "We'll stand with you, boss. For the ranch and for her." That evening, Clara lingered by the door to Samuel's study, eavesdropping as he mapped out defenses, with Amos and Jonah reinforcing the gates, positioning lookout points, stashing extra rifles in the barn. Her heart pounded, a mix of terror and resolve. She wasn't just a pawn in this game. She was part of the ranch now, and she wouldn't let Agnes drag her away without a struggle. When Samuel caught her shadow in the doorway, he sighed. "Go to bed, Clara. This ain't for you." She stepped inside instead, her chin lifted. "You won't let her take me, will you?" Samuel studied her, the lamplight casting shadows on his scarred face. "Not while I've got breath in me." Clara nodded, believing him for the first time. But she knew breath could be fleeting on the frontier, where justice was often decided by the quickest draw. As she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, she vowed to herself, if trouble came, she'd face it head on. No more running, no more waiting. The wind turned to nights later, carrying the metallic tang of impending rain that never fell. The moon loomed large and yellow, illuminating the plains in an eerie glow. Samuel stood on the porch, rifle at his side, revolver holstered, scanning the darkness. He wasn't one for needless worry, but he recognized the signs of trouble brewing restless animals. A hush in the air that felt deliberate. Word had trickled in from Bitterroot. Agnes had allied with Harlan Voss. An outlaw Samuel had tangled with years ago during a cattle drive gone wrong. Voss was a rustler, a thief, and a killer, with a grudge as deep as the Grand Canyon. Samuel had put a slug in Voss's leg back then, crippling him and ending his days as a fast rider. Now, Agnes had bought Voss's loyalty with promises of gold from Clara's sale, turning old hatred into fresh violence. In the barn, Amos and Jonah prepared, laying out rifles on hay bales and stacking crates of bullets alongside bundles of dynamite. Samuel kept for blasting stumps. "We're outnumbered," Boss Amos grumbled, loading a Winchester. 3 men and a slip of a girl against Voss's gang? Ain't fair odds. Samuel puffed on a cheroot, the smoke curling into the night. "Then we'll make it unfair in our favor." He outlined the plan, tripwires strung with bells around the perimeter, dynamite buried near the main trail, sharpshooters positioned in the loft and behind the corral. Clara helped Leela in the kitchen, bandaging cloths and boiling water for potential wounds. But her mind was elsewhere. The ranch buzzed with preparation, dogs pacing, the horses snorting uneasily. Later, as Leela dozed by the fire, Clara slipped out to the barn, her footsteps light on the packed earth. "I want to help," she declared, standing before Samuel and the others. Samuel looked up from cleaning his revolver. "This ain't play, child. Go back inside." "I can shoot," Clara insisted, her voice firm. "Jonah's been showing me with that old pistol." Samuel frowned, but Jonah chuckled softly. "She's got spine, boss. More than some cowpokes I've ridden with." Reluctantly, Samuel handed her a double-barreled Derringer, small enough for her hands. "Stay by the house. Don't fire unless you're sure of your target." Clara nodded, gripping the gun tightly. "I'll be sure." The weapon felt heavy, a symbol of the harsh world she was entering. But it also felt right, like claiming her place in the fight. Dawn was far off. The ranch plunged into darkness, with every lantern extinguished. Shadows cloaked the buildings, and the only sounds were the occasional whinny or the wind whispering through the grass. They'd set the traps, waited in silence, tension thick as molasses. Then, from the west, the faint thunder of Hooveston, maybe 12 riders, approaching with purpose. Jonah peered through a slit in the barn door. "They're here, boss." Voss leading the pack. Samuel chambered around. "Let 'em come." Beside him in the house, Clara crouched by a window, the Derringer steady in her grasp. She was no longer the abandoned girl at the station. She was Clara of Harrow Ranch, ready to defend what was hers. The riders charged, a whistle piercing the night as they bore down. Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes lighting the darkness like fireflies in hell. Samuel's first shot felled a rider from his horse, the man crumpling with a yell. Amos and Jonah returned fire from the barn, their bullets whizzing through the air, dropping to more before the outlaws scattered for cover. Harlan Voss bellowed from behind a boulder, his voice rough with hate. "Harrow, give us the girl, and we'll burn this place slow instead of fast." Samuel's response was a shot that chipped the rock near Voss's head. "Come and get her, you bastard." The battle raged, bullets pinging off fences and splintering wood. Clara watched from her window, heart racing as the chaos unfolded. Then she heard the groan Jonah, hit in the arm, slumping against the barn wall. Without hesitation, she dashed out, keeping low as shots cracked overhead. "Jonah," she whispered, reaching him and tugging at his good arm. "Leave me, girl," he rasped, blood soaking his sleeve. Clara refused, dragging him inch by inch toward the house, her muscles screaming. Bullets kicked up dirt around them, but Amos provided cover, his rifle barking steadily. "That girl's got fire," Amos muttered, admiration in his tone. Inside, Leela pressed a rag to Jonah's wound as Clara panted, sweat stinging her eyes. But the fight wasn't over. Samuel had spotted Voss in the fray, their eyes locking across the yard. Memories flooded back the old rustling job, the knife fight that left Samuel scarred. This was personal. Grabbing his knife and revolver, Samuel charged from cover, weaving through the shadows toward Voss. They met near the water trough, circling like wolves. "You should have finished me back then, Harrow," Voss sneered, drawing his own blade. "Reckon I'll fix that now," Samuel growled. They clashed, guns discarded for steel, blades flashing in the moonlight. Voss slashed at Samuel's side, drawing blood, but Samuel countered, his knife sinking into Voss's shoulder. Pain fueled them both, but Samuel thought of Clara for waiting alone, of the family he'd lost and the one he'd found. With a final thrust, he drove the blade home, Voss gasping as he fell, eyes glazing over. The outlaws, leaderless, broke ranks and fled, their retreat a scramble into the night. Silence descended, broken by the wounded's moans and the acrid smell of gunpowder. Samuel stood over Voss's body, bleeding but alive, then looked to the porch where Clara waited, Derringer still in hand. He nodded warily. The night was won, but the scars would linger. Dawn broke over Harrow Ranch, the sun rising slow and merciless on the carnage below. Outlaw bodies lay scattered, vultures already wheeling above. Inside, Jonah's wound was bound, his color returning under Lila's care. "You saved my hide, Clara," he said with a weak smile. "Grit like that, you'll outlast us all." Clara managed a nod, but exhaustion and relief warred within her. The fear of Agnes loomed still. Would she stop, or was this just the beginning? But fate intervened. By noon, riders approached Ednett foes, but Sheriff Harlan and his deputies, drawn by reports of gunfire echoing to Bitterroot. "What in God's name happened here?" the sheriff demanded, surveying the dead. "A reckoning," Samuel replied, bandaged but unbowed. "Started with a woman named Agnes. She's the root of it." The sheriff spat. "We know her type. Schemer, through and through." His men rode out and returned hours later with Agnes in irons, caught in a cabin outside town, counting coins she thought she'd earned from Clara's misery. Clara watched from the porch as Agnes was hauled before Samuel, her defiance cracked. "This ain't over, Harrow. That girl's mine by rights." Samuel shook his head. "She belongs to no one. But she's family now." The sheriff dragged Agnes away, her curses fading into the wind. That evening, Samuel called Clara to the porch, a sheaf of papers in hand. "Wired the judge in Laramie. Adoption's in motion. Papers come next week." Clara stared, tears pricking her eyes for the first time. "You're keeping me. For good." Samuel cleared his throat, awkward with emotion. "Ain't nobody else fool enough to handle you. Might as well make it legal." She hugged him fiercely, and after a moment, he patted her back. "You're home, Clara. Safe." For the first time, she believed it. No longer abandoned, she was Clara Harrow, part of something unbreakable. Years rolled on, the Wyoming plains taming under railroads and settlers. Harrow Ranch endured, its fences stronger, its herd thriving. By a fireside one evening, Clara Harrow, a woman of strength and poise, shared the tale with wide-eyed grandchildren. "They came under the moon, guns blazing, aiming to steal what we'd built," she said, flames dancing in her eyes. "But we held, not 'cause we were meaner, but 'cause we wouldn't bend." A boy piped up, "Weren't you afraid?" "Afraid." "My bones shook," Clara admitted. "But fear's just a test. Failing it is the real sin." She gazed at the stars, remembering the platform, the weight, the man who'd chosen her. The West didn't break folks, it revealed them. Some crumbled, some stood. I stood. The children listened, rapt. Clara rose, dusting her skirts. "Out here, family's what you choose with ones who fight the storm beside you. To survive, you dig in and hold." The fire crackled, the wind sang. And Clara's story lived in a beacon of resilience in a land of endless skies. But the tale wasn't just history. It sparked debates around campfires and dinner tables. Was violence the only answer to injustice, or could mercy have changed the outcome? Did Samuel's scar make him a hero or a haunted man? Clara's transformation from victim to victor raised questions about fate versus will, about whether abandonment forged strength or merely pain. As the ranch settled into peace, Clara knew one truth: in the American West, survival demanded tough choices, and those choices echoed through generations, challenging all who heard them to ponder their own paths. The ranch prospered, but echoes of that night lingered in the whispers of the wind, reminding all that peace was hard-won and fragile. Samuel, older now, watched Clara grow into the ranch's heart, his decision to take her in the best he'd ever made. Yet, doubts crept in during quiet moments. Had he been right to meet violence with violence? Or was there a better way? The town of Bitterroot debated it too, some calling Samuel a savior, others a vigilante who took the law into his own hands. Clara, for her part, embraced the complexity. She taught the young ones not just to shoot straight, but to think deep about right and wrong, about when to fight and when to forgive. Her story became legend, passed in saloons and churches, provoking arguments. Was Agnes redeemable, or was her greed beyond saving? Did Clara's grit excuse the bloodshed or glorify it? In the end, Harrow Ranch stood as testament to chosen bonds over blood, to endurance over ease. But the questions remained, fueling discussions that kept the tale alive, urging folks to weigh the cost of justice in a lawless land. As the echoes of the battle faded into the vast Wyoming plains, Harrow Ranch began to heal under the relentless sun. But the scars of that night, both physical and unseen, served as a constant reminder of the fragility of peace in a land where justice often came at the end of a barrel. Clara Harrow, no longer the wide-eyed girl clutching a valise on a dusty platform, had emerged from the firestorm transformed, her resolve hardened like iron forged in a blacksmith's flame. Samuel Harrow, too, carried the weight of the victory. His shoulder wound a fresh addition to the old scar on his cheek, a testament to the costs of standing firm against the tide of greed and betrayal. In the days that followed, the ranch buzzed with a cautious return to normalcy. Jonah, his arms slung in a makeshift bandage crafted by Lilla's steady hands, hobbled around the corral, insisting on helping with the horses despite the pain that twisted his features with every step. "Can't let a little lead slow me down," he'd grunt, though his eyes betrayed the gratitude he felt toward Clara for dragging him to safety. Amid the hail of bullets, Amos, ever the stoic one, patrolled the fences with extra vigilance, his rifle never far from reach, muttering about how that woman's poison might still linger in the wind. Lila kept the kitchen fires burning, dishing out hearty stews and fresh bread, her sharp tongue softened by the shared ordeal, often slipping Clara an extra biscuit with a wink. "You've earned it, child. Guts like yours don't grow on trees." Clara herself moved through the routines with a new purpose, her small frame seeming taller, her steps more assured. She helped mend the bullet-riddled barn door, learned to reload a rifle under Amos's watchful eye, and even took to riding the pony across the fields, the wind whipping her hair as if carrying away the remnants of her old fears. But at night, when the ranch fell quiet and the stars blanketed the sky, doubts crept in. Had the violence been necessary? Could Samuel have negotiated with Agnes, or was her heart too blackened by avarice to see reason? Clara pondered these questions in the silence of her room, the adoption papers now framed on the wall, a legal bond that felt deeper than blood. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was building, claiming her place in a world that had once discarded her. Word of the showdown spread through Bitterroot like wildfire across dry grass, igniting debates in saloons and mercantiles alike. In the dimly lit interior of the rusty spur, men gathered around scarred tables, nursing whiskeys and arguing over the rights and wrongs of it all. Harrow did what any man will, protected his own, one grizzled miner declared, slamming his glass down. But was it justice or vengeance? That Voss fella had it coming, sure, but how many bodies does it take to right a wrong? Another patron, a former lawman with a badge long retired, shook his head. Vigilantism breeds chaos. Sheriff should have handled it from the start. Now we've got blood on the soil, and who knows if it'll sprout more trouble. The women at the general store clucked their tongues over bolts of fabric, their whispers laced with moral quandaries. That poor girl dragged into such brutality, Mrs. Ellison sighed. But look at her now, strong as any cowboy. Makes you wonder if fighting back is the only way to end injustice, or if turning the other cheek might have saved lives. These discussions rippled outward, reaching even the distant homesteads where families huddled around oil lamps, sharing tales of the Harrow standoff as cautionary stories. Was violence an inevitable response to betrayal, or a cycle that perpetuated more harm? Did Agnes's greed justify her downfall, or was there room for redemption in a land that prized self-reliance above mercy? Clara overheard snippets during supply runs to town, the stares and murmurs following her like shadows. Some called her a hero, a symbol of resilience. Others pitied her as a child corrupted by the frontier's harsh code. The debates stirred something in here, a desire to understand, to question the black and white lines of right and wrong that the West so often blurred. Samuel, sensing Clara's inner turmoil, took her aside one crisp morning as they rode the fence line, the prairie stretching endlessly before them. The sun glinted off dew-kissed grass, and the air carried the fresh scent of earth after a rare drizzle. "You're quiet these days, girl," he said, his voice rough but kind, the scar on his cheek pulling tight as he spoke. "That night weighing on you?" Clara nodded, her hands tight on the reins. "We won, but was there another way? Without all the shooting, the blood?" Samuel reined in his horse, turning to face her. His eyes, usually guarded, softened with the wisdom of years spent wrestling demons. "Life out here ain't a storybook, Clara. Folks like Agnes and Vasti don't respond to words. They take until there's nothing left. I fought because walking away would have meant losing you, losing this ranch, losing the bit of good I've scraped together after Ellie." He paused, the mention of his lost daughter hanging heavy. "But yeah, I've wondered too. Every bullet I fired echoes in my head. Violence solves the immediate, but it leaves ghosts. The trick is living with them, learning from them." Their conversation lingered as they rode back, planting seeds of reflection in Clara's mind. She began to see the ranch not just as a home, but as a bastion against the injustices that plagued the frontier: abundant exploitation, the raw power of the greedy over the vulnerable. In the weeks that followed, Clara threw herself into the work with renewed vigor, helping expand the herd, planting a small garden behind the house where vegetables pushed through the stubborn soil. She even convinced Samuel to hire a tutor from Bitterroot, a retired schoolmarm who taught her reading and arithmetic by the fireside, opening worlds beyond the plains. Knowledge, Clara realized, was another weapon against unfairness, a way to challenge the status quo without always resorting to guns. As seasons turned, the ranch prospered, its fences mended and barns reinforced against future storms. Samuel's adoption of Clara became town legend, a story whispered with a mix of awe and controversy. Some praised it as an act of pure decency in a cynical world. Others questioned if a scarred rancher was fit to raise a child exposed to such brutality. "He's turned her into a fighter," one saloon patron argued. "But at what cost? Innocence lost ain't easily regained." Counterpoints flew. Better a fighter than a victim. The West don't coddle the weak. These debates fueled community gatherings, where folks gathered to hash out the ethics of self-defense versus lawfulness, pondering if injustice demanded violent retribution or if patience and reform could pave a better path. Clara grew amid this backdrop, her teenage years marked by the ranch's rhythms and the lingering shadows of that fateful night. She took on more responsibilities, during cattle to market, negotiating with suppliers in Bitterroot, her voice steady and her gaze unflinching. Jonah, fully healed, became like an uncle, teaching her trick shots and tall tales around the campfire, always with a moral tucked in: violence ain't glory, Clara. It's a last resort when words fail. Amos, gruff as ever, showed her how to track intruders across the plains, emphasizing vigilance over vengeance. Leela baked pies and imparted wisdom on human nature. Greed like Agnes's rots from within, but don't let it harden you to muck. There's strength and kindness too. One particularly harsh winter, when blizzards howled across the plains and cattle huddled against the wind, trouble tested them again, it from outlaws, but from nature's indifference. A neighboring rancher, desperate after losing half his herd to the cold, attempted to rustle Harrow cattle under cover of snow. Samuel and Clara caught him red-handed, rifles raised in the swirling white. The man, gaunt and pleading, begged for mercy, just trying to feed my family. Times are tough. Here was injustice in a different guise, not malice, but survival's cruel edge. Samuel lowered his gun, his face etched with conflict. Take what you need for tonight, he said finally, but come back tomorrow. We'll work something out, share the load. Clara watched, surprised, as the man nodded gratefully and rode off. Later, by the fire, Samuel explained, not every fight needs lead. Sometimes, extending a hand breaks the cycle. It was a lesson in nuance, showing Clara that violence wasn't always the answer. Compassion could disarm threats where bullets might escalate them. This act sparked more debates in Bitterroot, with folks divided. Was Samuel going soft or wise? Did mercy invite more theft or foster community? Clara, now a young woman, joined these discussions at town meetings, her voice rising above the murmurs. We've seen enough blood, she'd say. Injustice thrives when we turn on each other. Maybe building together is the real strength. Her words provoked strong reactions. Some cheered her evolution from victim to advocate. Others accused her of naivety, arguing that the West's harshness demanded a firm hand. Years blurred into decades, the railroad snaking closer to Bitterroot, bringing progress and change. Samuel grew older, his hair silvered, his steps slower, but his bond with Clara unbreakable. On his deathbed, surrounded by the ranch hands who'd become family, he gripped her hand. You saved me as much as I saved you, he whispered. Keep standing tall, but remember, fight smart, not just hard. His passing left a void, but Clara inherited the ranch, transforming it into a haven for the displaced orphans, widows, drifters seeking a fresh start. She hired on based on character, not kin, echoing Samuel's choice to take her in. By a crackling fire on a starry night, Clara Herono matriarch, her face lined with the wisdom of trials, gathered the ranch's young ones, sharing the saga that defined her. It started on a lonely platform. She began, her voice rich and measured, drawing them in like a magnet, abandoned, waiting for a world that didn't care. Then came Samuel, scarred and solitary, who chose to fight for a stranger. She recounted the battle in vivid detail, gunfire's roar, the drag of Jonah's wounded body, the clash of knives under the moon, pausing at each turn to probe deeper. Was the violence justified? Did it end injustice or merely delay it? Agnes's greed was a poison, but what if mercy had been offered earlier? The children listened, eyes wide, as Clara wove in the moral threads. A girl asked, did it have to end in death? Clara nodded thoughtfully. That's the question that haunts me. In that moment, yes, it saved lives. But looking back, perhaps prevention through community, through laws that protect the vulnerable, could have changed the path. Violence solves the symptom. Addressing roots like poverty and abandonment heals the disease. An older boy challenged, but out here waiting for help means losing everything. Isn't fighting back the only way? Clara smiled faintly. It's one way, but not the only. Samuel taught me that. We debated it endlessly, justice versus vengeance, force versus forgiveness. The West tested us, revealing our cores. Some break under injustice, others rise, but at what cost? As the fire dimmed, Clara concluded, family isn't blood, it's the choice to stand together. Injustice lurks, but so does hope. Plant your feet, question your actions, and build a world where violence isn't the first resort. The children dispersed, minds buzzing with the tale's complexities, carrying the debates forward. Harrow Ranch endured, a symbol of resilience amid change. Clara's legacy lived in the stories passed down, provoking endless discussions. Did the battle glorify brutality or highlight necessary defense? Was Agnes a villain beyond redemption or a product of a harsh system? These questions kept the narrative alive, urging generations to grapple with violence's role in combating injustice. In the end, Clara Harrow proved that from abandonment could spring unbreakable strength, that chosen bonds outlasted blood, and that true victory lay not in conquest, but in the reflective pursuit of a fairer frontier. The plains whispered her story eternally, a satisfying close to a life reclaimed, where hope triumphed over despair. What do you think about the themes of violence and injustice in this story? Was the bloodshed inevitable, or could different choices have led to a peaceful resolution? Share your opinions in the comments below. Take a stand and express your viewpoint. Your thoughts could spark even more debate.